SEC coaches got back from Destin, Florida, and it was an eventful week last week. The SEC coaches' spring meetings were interesting. We had shots from, Steve Sarkisian talking about the Big 12. We had quotes from John Summerall. We had Kirby Smart saying that the SEC should potentially do its own league, start its own league if we can't figure out some sort of rules and regulations for everybody. So if there's one thing that happened last week, it is fireworks. It is a ton of quotes. It was not a boring spring meeting. I mean, there were a ton of questions and things that really got people going. So we're going to talk about all this. We're going to jump right into it right here. The first thing that we're going to jump into is the coaches in the SEC where they misled. So, what happened is they went from an 8-game SEC schedule to a 9-game SEC schedule. We all know this. They were forced to do this basically by the Big Ten because they have 9 games, and the SEC had a couple cupcake games. But you can argue, in my opinion, that the SEC has a stronger top-to-bottom schedule, so it's harder for them to get a bunch of teams in because they beat up on each other. Most people are going to agree with that, especially where I live in South Carolina. But there are some people that obviously think that they should play 9 games as well. And obviously the Big Ten has been on the top the last couple of years as far as best team. That's obvious. But let's get into it. So they went to 9-game schedule under the kind of presumption that Greg Sankey had said, hey, we're going to go to 9 games, but we're going to guarantee, he allegedly, kind of swirling around, that he had told SEC coaches, you're going to get more SEC teams in because we are playing a 9-game schedule. And if you go 9-3, it's not going to hurt you as much because we went to the 9th game. Because up until this point, there has not really been an SEC team that went 9-3 and got into the playoff because they're just beating up on each other. So, but with the 9-game SEC schedule, Greg Sankey allegedly had told coaches that, it was going to be easier for them to get in, blah, 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 blah. Well, that's all changed. So John Summerall came out during his media day, and said that he felt misled about whether they were going to get more teams in the SEC in the playoff. So now it's sounding like they're not potentially going to get, more teams in the playoff. And, it's just the same old, should we expand, blah, blah, blah. Let's jump into arguably the biggest quote and the best quote of the week, in my opinion. Mike Elko was asked about the college football playoff and how many teams should get in, just like every single coach was asked this week. It was literally the entire talking point just about for media days. And Mike Elko's response was, I want 40 teams to get in because then I won't get fired. So, I mean, this is just a hilarious response. This is kind of more of what I want because right now everybody is just kind of just spewing their own agenda and BS and stuff like that, to where it's like they are kind of just like don't know what to say and kind of giving us BS answers and just like stating what's obvious. The coaches are going to want more teams in because if you get more teams in, they're not going to get fired as easily because if there's 16, 24 teams in, it's easier to make it. They don't get fired. They get more extensions. They get more money. Well, Mike Elko said, I want 40 in, but he also followed that up with, he kind of laughed when he said that, obviously. But what he said following was, the playoffs should not be easy to get into. What is wrong with making it hard is what he said. So this is a hilarious response from Mike Elko. This is an actual response. I'm glad that he had the balls to say what he thinks and make a kind of a funny moment out of it and not just come up with some like politically coachable talk. Tell us why or why not coaches should have decisions in this, which they probably should not have decisions in this, like we just talked about, because they're just going to elect for more and more teams so they don't get fired as easily. So that was one of the most hilarious quotes, speeches of the entire SEC coaches events. I'm going to give you my quick thoughts on it really quick. Mike Elko is one of my favorite coaches. I love Mike Elko. The fact that he's just like, you know what? Yeah, every coach is going to want more teams in. Newsflash, the more teams that are in, the less chance that we get fired and the more money we get to make. That's the truth. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. There's not anything wrong with coaches not wanting to get fired and making a lot of money because it's easy to get in. The problem is they shouldn't be in charge of choosing what the format is because they're going to choose what they want that best is best equipped for them. Obviously, I mean, anybody's going to do that. So that's the thing that's obviously wrong with it. We need somebody to come in, and obviously we're not going to have this because people running college football are stupid. But I think you should go, if you go anything to 16, but I mean, I wouldn't be against staying at 12, but 24 is just ridiculous. But anyway, like I said, coaches should not be in charge of it. You got to have somebody come in and put some rules in place and stick to them. Have the authority to stick to them, not just go and sue somebody and then get out of it. And then, a judge come in and then the judge be from the same town as the college. And then they get some type of deal because they're alumni, blah, 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 blah. So that's my quick thoughts on it. Moving on more into the SEC Media Day discussion. The big discussion was, we've already kind of touched on it a little bit. What's the right number for the college football playoff? The Big 10, the Big 12, and the ACC are all pushing for 24 teams. The SEC has been more for a 16-team playoff, but recently, like we've said, a lot of coaches have, especially in the SEC, have been kind of for the 24-team playoff, kind of for the reasons we talked about. They get more money and less chance of getting fired because there's more teams getting in. And especially in a conference like the SEC where they beat up on each other, if there's more teams in it, then the chance of them getting left out because they lost to Georgia or they lost to Texas is a less likely chance if there's more teams in it. So Lane Kiffin kind of said that he wouldn't be against going to 24. Kirby Smart had said that he wouldn't be going to against 24. So, and what my biggest thoughts on it is, I don't think you should go to 24 because it's just not a good idea because everybody said this. So I'm just going to be kind of saying what everybody else is saying, but I'm going to put my own spin on it. In short, this is obvious. You're going to have the regular season be pointless. That Alabama-Georgia game, that Texas-Georgia game, that Ole Miss-LSU game, now that one's a little bit different because of all the turmoil, but like those huge games in week 2 and week 4, yeah, they're going to be kind of important, but like they're not going to have they're close to significance and they're close to importance because if you lose it, who gives a crap? Like, who cares? I mean, yeah, they care because they want to win, but like, it's not like do or die. I mean, you can just come out and, as long as if you're a school like Texas or you're a school like Georgia, you can go 9-3 every year and make it in just about, most likely, if it's 24 teams. And most years, Georgia is going to go 9-3 or better. I mean, if they go 8-4, I'd be, they're not going 8-4 this year, but I'm just saying in general, a lot of the top schools are constantly, so you're just going to have the same like repeat of they're back in it, which is already that way. But this real significance now is you can't screw up. You lose more than 2 games and you're on the brink, and it's fun. You can feel it in the stadium. You can feel the stressed out. You can feel the anticipation. You can feel the weight of the moment. And you're going to take all that away. And what's just going to end up happening is you're just going to have a couple of games a year that, like, yeah, they're big games, but it doesn't really matter that much down the stretch because they're going to get, both teams are going to get anyway. I mean, and it's just like the same thing of kind of the SEC championship. I mean, both teams, it doesn't matter. You win or lose, you're going to get in, if you go to 24. So 16 is the right number for me. That, to me, the reason I like 16 is because that way you extend it to a little bit more of the SEC teams and the Big Ten teams that are kind of beating up on each other, but you still preserve the regular season compared to 24. I mean, there's going to be teams in that 24 playoff that aren't good enough to be in the college football playoff. They're just not. Like, there's probably 3 to 7 teams that are good enough to be like the top 4 or win the national championship based on momentum and any given night and that type of stuff. But like, there's probably, depending on the year, if it's 24 teams, probably 6 to 10 teams that don't have any business being in the playoff and just aren't going to get – the games are going to be crap. Some of them are going to be really, really not good. They're going to be boring football games. So I just don't not a fan of that at all. I mean, some of the first round games have not been good right now. We're only at 12. They're talking about doubling it. So that's my kind of concern with it. We're going to move on, and we're going to go to the SEC championship. We kind of talked about that a little bit. Doesn't even matter. That is that's just kind of, I think that's going away. I mean, Lane Kiffin made a comment saying, Lane Kiffin made a comment saying, Kirby lost his quarterback in the SEC championship game. Sure, he would have liked to have him. And then Steve Sarkisian was like, well, we like the SEC championship game. It used to mean something, obviously, to win that game. I think those championship games are going away, unfortunately. All right, here's another big story of the week. Steve Sarkisian comes out and says, if you didn't hear it, you live under a rock. Steve Sarkisian come out and says that the Texas Longhorns could beat just about all the Big 12 teams with their backups. And the next thing you know, it's all over the internet, blah, 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 blah. And Texas Tech's coaches and their billionaires and boosters come out and say, oh, okay, you think you can beat us and everybody else in the Big 12? How about you schedule us week 1? We'll change our schedule around. We'll make our teams from week 1 and week 2 play each other, and we'll schedule you. How about that? And now, I mean, it is just Texas Tech just pulled the ultimate, billionaire, just kind of like, if you're going to run that mouth, back it up. So we're going to see this never going to happen, in my opinion, because Texas plays Ohio State in week 2. And especially with the 12 team right now, I mean, if they lose a couple more games, I mean, it's just like last year. Texas lost 3 games. One of them was to Florida. And if they potentially, you could argue that if they didn't schedule the Ohio State game last year, they would have been in. But this is why I think 16 would be good. Go back really quickly. 16 would be good because even if you go 9-3, you got a little wiggle room. All right, back to what I was just talking about. Yeah, so Steve Sarkisian had said Big 12 will beat them with our backups. Texas Tech said, okay, put your money where your mouth is. We'll schedule you week 1. I don't think it's going to happen because Texas has to play Ohio State in week 2. So it was just a crazy – I like both the statements from both the coaches being a little cocky and getting that season adrenaline going. I'm a fan of that. One of the bigger things that kind of took place over the week was Kirby Smart saying if we can't find rules everybody plays by, then we should play on our own. I'm not afraid to break away when talking about the SEC. This kind of went everywhere when he said we should just do our own league. I mean, the SEC has its own money, has its own TV deals that they could figure out. This is never going to – I mean, if anything, I don't know if they would allow this to happen, but if anything, you just have you're going to have 25 or 30 of the top schools in the country play in one league. I don't think you're just going to have an SEC league just because I just don't see that happening. But I think it's more of kind of Kirby's just saying, if people can't get together, we're not afraid to leave. And I think maybe his thought process is just kind of scare people into maybe putting some rules and regulations in place. So this is just an ongoing thing. You never know. I mean, these coaches, they they're just trying to get some type of rules and regulations that we need. All right. One of the other last things we're going to talk about today is no more cupcakes before rivalry week, like we talked about. SEC games went to 9 SEC games. So the biggest thing for me in this is the SEC voted to play conference games the week before rivalry week, starting 2027, which everybody knows in the SEC. If you grew up like a SEC fan, the week before rivalry week, just about everybody's playing a punching bag. I mean, they're just beating the crap out of them. So now you've got SEC games right before rivalry week, which is, I mean, I'm a South Carolina fan. We play Georgia before we play Clemson. So, I mean, yeah, I guess it's good for the schedule and all that. And, you know, not good to, it's good to not have a cupcake, I guess. But I would have liked to have somebody somewhat, you know, manageable. Not that you can choose your SEC team you're playing, but I don't know. I just, this rule, I get it. But like, if you go in week 2 and week 3 and week 4, Big Ten teams are playing Hawaii and beating them 60-3. So, I mean, I don't know. I kind of like the cupcake before the rivalry week, but I'm a South Carolina fan. So playing Georgia the week before we play Clemson is not fun because it's going to be a tough game. Injuries could happen, especially playing a physical team like that in the SEC or any SEC team, but especially Georgia. So these SEC games right before rivalry week, they're going to be fun to watch, but I mean, they're going to be competitive going down towards the end of the season, especially with the college football playoff just being 12 right now. I mean, you're talking about for South Carolina, for example, they got Georgia and Clemson, like I've said a bunch of times. But if you win both of those games somehow, which they're probably not going to, I mean, you're really advancing your name into the playoff. And depending how good Clemson is, Georgia's going to be unbelievable. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on the SEC moving to 9 games and the cupcake games before rivalry going away. Look, my name's John Miller Altman. This is Tavern Talk. Like it, subscribe, you know, follow us on all our social media platforms, Tavern Talk, and give us any feedback, comments, any commentary that you might tell us to help, and tell us what you think. Let's go. Y'all have a good day. Let's go.